Hello there, and welcome to the Terrace Scottish Football Podcast. My name, as it so often is Craig Gordon Telfer, and right now I am joined by my close associate Shaughan McGuigan.
Hello there.
And you know what happens when the Titus O'Neill and Heath Slater of the Terrace get together? Now, Shaughan, you'll have no idea who those two people are, but some of our listeners might. We are going to experience a decline in our solo professional wrestling careers. We'll form a middling tag team for a couple of months called Slater Gator. We'll go our separate ways and never speak of it again. But during our brief time in the limelight, we'll talk a little bit about lower league Scottish football.
When were they wrestlers? I'm completely unfamiliar with them.
I think Slater Gator were around, I think it was 2014 into 2015.
Okay, were they WWE?
Yes.
They sound awful. It's a really bad name.
They were, Titus O'Neill go the hoorah, hoorah, hoorah. You ever?
No.
Nah. Okay. Well, I can assure you, Titus O'Neill's perhaps most famous for they had the Royal Rumble in Saudi Arabia, and as he was running down to the ring, he tripped on a mat and fell under the ring.
Actually, I might have seen that.
Yeah,
that was funny.
He was apparently supposed to be a really, really nice guy backstage, but there was a segment where Vince McMahon came down to the ring, and he, in a playful way, put his hands on Vince McMahon and was effectively taken off television for months by way of punishment. So just really weird.
Vince McMahon is a terrible eggo, isn't he?
Oh, Vince McMahon's a very bad egg, and if
the
we were
worst egg. Arguably the worst.
He is one of the worst eggs. Not just a bad egg, but like a big putrid hen. And if we were to talk about Vince McMahon's badness, we'd be here all day, Shaughan, and we don't have time to do that. But what we do have time to do is talk about lower league Scottish football, and we are conducting our patented 3-game format. Oi, Telfer, what are you on about? There was no championship football this weekend. Is there something wrong with your brain? And I said, well, yes, you're right. There is something wrong with my brain, but there was no championship football. We're going to be looking at 2 games from League One and a third match from League Two. It's not quite what you're used to, but it is still normal. It's basically like trying out a different shampoo.
Yeah, no, totally. The only thing I was going to say was, and I'm sorry, I'm going to refer back to wrestling. Are you okay with kind of tag teams being made up of solo wrestlers, or should they be like Luke and Butch, the Bushwhackers, just a team?
I see what you mean. I think that sometimes when wrestlers are just thrown together because they've got nothing to do with one another, it sometimes doesn't make sense. You can see this looks quite tired. Sometimes it can be quite inspired. Slater Gator was not inspired, but for instance, the 3-man band with Heath Slater, Drew McIntyre, and his name escapes me, Jinder Mahal. That was quite inspired, although they were really terrible as well.
Well, there you go. But it's all different, really, isn't it?
Yes. Just Shaughan, before we continue, just check in on your progress. How is everything?
I'm well. I tell you what I'm happy about. I'm glad that we have progressed from last weekend. I know that lots of Scottish football fans have a kind of favourite Scottish footballing weekend in the calendar. I have a least favourite, and it's probably the Scottish Cup League Cup second round.
Okay.
The League Cup second round. For 2 reasons. A, Wraith Rovers are very rarely in it, and then B, they don't have they put a pause on the championship. So still have League One, still have League Two, but they put a pause on the championship. So it always feels like a bit of I don't know how to describe it, a weekend that's that drags, I suppose.
Well, I mean, it gives you the opportunity to go and watch other football. Did you go and see another game this weekend?
So I was going to go to a game, and then I realised that the League Cup games were on Premier. Started watching Morton Aberdeen. That was awful. So switched over when Aberdeen took a lead to St Mirren versus Hearts, and that was awful as well, unfortunately.
Yes, well, not great. Well, that's a very much a missed opportunity for you. I'm fine, thanks for asking. But just before we get going, just a couple of corrections and clarifications from last week's podcast. Wagon Wheel was partly written by Bob Dylan in 1973. He apparently came up with the chorus, and then 25 years later, Ketch Secker of the Old Crow Medicine Show wrote some verses around it, so it's a rare Dylan Secker joint. It was covered by Darius Rucker in 2013, so I'm glad to get to the bottom of that.
There you go.
And just one more thing, and it was mentioned in last week's Patreon, but is perhaps worth discussing on the main show. We mentioned the time where Joel Sked and Craig Cairns were pranked on a live episode of Hearts Standard with a fictional striker. The striker was Haywood Jablomi from Anderlecht, and Joel Sked fell for it.
Craig Cairns didn't.
Craig Cairns didn't, but Joel Sked
did.
Haywood Jablomi, the Anderlecht striker. So we'll never know if he ever signs for Hearts, or who knows what Jonestown might uncover. But Shaughan, we will start with our first game, and we're going to League One to Cumbernauld. We will examine Hamilton Academical's 2-1 home defeat to East Fife. Although Scott Robinson put the Accies ahead after 15 minutes, they imploded at the start of the second half, and Robert Jones scored twice in 60 seconds to give the Fifers the win. And it's with Alan Troughton somehow missing a penalty too. So I don't know what the opposite of a red letter day is, a more negative version of it, but this is it. Alan Troughton does not miss penalties. The defeat was Accies' first of the season, but they're still top of the table owing to a superior goal difference, and it's East Fife's first win of the campaign. They're off the mark and into 7th. Shaughan, I would like your thoughts on this game, ideally right now, please.
I didn't see this coming at all. Even when I saw the scoreline, I thought, right, well, probably Hamilton have been the better team, and East Fife have kind of scraped some kind of result together. And as much as Rory Adams had a good game in goals for East Fife, his debut after he arrived on loan, actually East Fife certainly in the second half arguably were the better team, and even in the first half. They had chances as much as Hamilton were the better side. It was interesting to listen to Dick Campbell. He said that he was very angry at halftime, which I thought was interesting because I didn't think as much as Hamilton were the better side. Like East Fife had chances in that first half, albeit he made I think it was at least 2 changes at the interval, and that seemed to very much swing the game in their favour. And I thought East Fife were ultimately worthy winners.
Yeah, I think so. We could probably start by talking about East Fife, get them out of the way, and let's get into all the shenanigans that Hamilton Academical have been up to over the past week. Oh my goodness! Yeah, I thought it was a really good performance from East Fife, and I think that it's important to say when we refer back to the big preview podcast we did at the start of the season. Like, we were worried about East Fife, and I think we had them pegged for a difficult campaign ahead, and it was because they'd only signed one player. Lewis Latona came in on loan from Livingston. He was the only player that they'd brought in. Since then, however, they have strengthened the team. I think they've strengthened it quite well as well. They've brought in, I think, Sam Culbert, who looks quite a good player in the middle of the park. He's coming on loan. They've got a cooperation partnership agreement with Livingston. And Culbert, I kept getting him and Mikey McKenna mistaken for one another. I think Culbert wears 22, McKenna wears 23, and they've both got like sort of floppy, quite good heads of hair. But nevertheless, Culbert looks like he's got something about him. It's a really nice, quite a direct run, and he does well to slip in Robert Jones for what ultimately proved to be the winning goal. So Culbert's definitely got something about him. Tommy Goss has come in. Now, Tommy Goss has only made one appearance so far in the SPFL Trust Trophy win over Hearts B, but that's another option they've got there. So the team does look a lot stronger, and the team that started this match, very different. Well, I'd say very different. There's probably about a third of the team's different from the team that started against Peterhead on the opening day. They lost that match 4-0. So I think East Fife are in a better place and a lot more competitive, and I think this game showed that they've got the stomach for the fight and aren't just in the division to make up the numbers. There's a lot to like about this performance. Yeah,
totally. I think somebody literally kind of asked that question. What has been the difference between how could East Fife go to Hamilton and pull off that result and that performance, but struggle so much at Peterhead on the opening day of the season? I think it might actually been up to about 5 changes in the starting lineup. However, I think in terms of Sam Culbert, so you've already referenced him, his run for the second goal, as much as Robert Jones' finish was very, very good, albeit the fella comes in slow motion, but nevertheless we'll probably come to Robert Jones. But Sam Culbert's run from deep to right into the kind of heart of the Hamilton defence, slip in Jones was excellent. And I don't know, It must have been, I don't know where I was. I must have been in a car on the opening day of the season, and David Martindale was talking about Sam Culbert. So I'm trying to think who they played. Was it Kilmarnock, maybe?
Yeah,
on the opening day of the League
right.
Cup season?
That's right.
And Martindale was saying that it was after the game, can't remember what the score was, doesn't matter. But he was asked about him because he played so well. And he goes, well, my intention this season was to loan him out. However, he was so good today, I'm starting to think that maybe he could be in and around the Livingston, the first team squad. Now, that's not the case anymore. But clearly he holds him in high regard. And you can kind of see why. Mm-hmm. Like, I know, I think his debut was in one of the Challenge Cup games, and East Fife fans were raving about him.
Hearts B, they were very comfortable win against him. I think he might have scored in that game as well.
I think you could be right. And again, it looks like he was excellent again on Saturday. So it feels like you're right from how we discussed East Fife, whatever it was, 3 or 4 weeks ago. It feels like they're in a far better place, and this wasn't a kind of smash and grab win. It wasn't the fact that Hamilton were a far better side on the day, and like Rudy Adams was incredible. Rudy Adams was good, but he wasn't incredible. It wasn't as if they were repelling Hamilton attacks for 90 minutes. They were probably worthy winners. So augurs well for East Fife going forward, I suppose.
I think so. Culbert gives them something they don't necessarily have, because when you look at the constituent parts in the midfield, you look at somebody like Conor McManus. Conor McManus is a really good ball player, but somebody who's quite happy to just sit in the centre circle and pop it around. Kieran Miller, a dog in the middle of the park, someone who's perhaps better without the ball than he is with it. Maybe the same could be said about Jess Norrie as well. But Culbert gives him that directness, someone that is quite happy to carry the ball. And if you've got someone that's good at dribbling with the ball, I think it frightens other teams as well, puts them on the back foot, and you could see that with the goals there. And I suppose that leads really nicely on to talking about Robert Jones's impact, because I thought that when they signed Tommy Goss, I perhaps wondered what that meant for Jones, because if you think about the forward line, if you've got Nathan Austin as your number 9, Alan Troughton, I know he's not necessarily a striker per se, but someone who'll play up front. Mikey McKenna is I'd say more of a forward than a midfielder.
Yeah.
And then Tommy Goss comes in on loan from Annan Athletic. Somebody who you'd probably say is like a better version of Robert Jones. But Jones comes off the bench at the interval here, and what an impact. His goals are really, really well taken. The first, you can maybe say it's quite perhaps bad defender from Hamilton Academical. It's not like Jones ghosts in to the area. Jones ambles into the area like a big toddler going into the shallow end of a swimming pool. and slides in. It's a good finish, but I think it could have been better defended. But the second goal's even better. You know, it's as we mentioned, Culbert's ball into him is good, but you wouldn't have ever described Robert Jones as having a jink in him, but to be able to bring it back onto his right foot, he takes Lee Kildare, who's a very good defender, he dumps Lee Kildare in his backside, and it's a good finish into the net. Smith doesn't even move because he's not anticipating the ball to go there. And it's great, the goals in, 52nd minute, 53rd minute, off the back of Alan Troughton having missed a penalty a couple of minutes earlier. And Alan Troughton, unusually for him, quite a poor penalty. You know, he's very precise with where he puts his penalties. It's always very low and very hard into the bottom corner. But this one was at a good height for the goalkeeper to save at. So not great from Alan Troughton, although he did look like a good game. And on top of that, Jones had a really good bit of play towards anything. He closed down Kyle McDonald on the balls in the byline to just basically, just through hard work, creates a chance for Alan Troughton, and Troughton kind of snatched at it, and Smith was able to block it. But a good performance for Jones. Liked listening to him his post-match interview, and like a lot of people, I perhaps more than most of kind of. I remember when they signed Robert Jones, just thinking, "What are you doing?" I don't think he's going to have much of an impact in this team. It feels like he's just a body, maybe a big boy that you can throw in the park. But he has. I mean, there's the 2 goals that I've got in the first one of the league campaign, and then last season, that run that he went on that ultimately drew a red card from Scott Hooper in the playoff final against Annan. So. In his last couple of games, between the tail end of last season and the start of this season, Jones is having a decent impact at East Fife, and that's great. Players I've written off that proved me wrong, good on him.
It's funny, I was thinking that. So we've not always been that complimentary about Jones, but over the weekend you had the SPFL putting out a real with his brace, which is very good. And then he was made the team of the week.
Mm.
And yes, I suppose the second goal, yes, it was made by Colbert, I suppose. And yes, it felt like it was in slow motion as he kind of cut inside and finished. But regardless, it looked like overall, in general, he had a very, very good game. And maybe you're right. When they signed Goss, I think we both thought he would be very much down the pecking order and the forward options for East Fife. Maybe that's not the case. Certainly on Saturday he was excellent.
Yeah, good on him. And the player you mentioned, Rory Adams, his performance. I'd seen Rory Adams a couple of times at Kelty Hearts last season on loan from Dundee United. Big laddie, a big laddie, and a decent goalkeeper. I don't think he's got quite the same level of potential as Liam McFarlane has.
Yeah.
So perhaps a downgrade in that regard. I think they need to get a goalkeeper in. They've got someone who has got League One experience. I think he must have played every game last season for Kelty Hearts. Really impressive. Made a really good save. Actually, probably maybe you say a match-winning save, actually, from Kevin O'Hara late on in the second half. I don't know what McLeod was doing. Just completely loses the run of the ball and doesn't realise O'Hara's behind him. But Adams certainly spots the danger, comes out, makes himself very big. And I think O'Hara's trying to lift it over the top of him, but anticipates it well and is able to bat the ball away. And it's a good piece of goalkeeping. So that's a position that East Fife really seemed to be struggling in after they couldn't get a hold of McFarlane. But in Adams, I think they've got a decent player that can come in and improve the team. Yeah,
he was interviewed as well after the game. He was asked what he thought about the dressing room, which obviously they didn't have that much knowledge of it because he just joined it. But he said, and I always think this is quite interesting. He says, I can't remember his quote. It was something like, "There's a lot of interesting characters in there," which I always take to make there's a lot of annoying people in there. But regardless, he felt that it was a really good dressing room and one that he could get involved in and enjoy. And he said himself quite rightly that he felt that he had a good debut. So fair play to him.
Good on him. But then if that's East Fife, there's one thing else I wanted to say about East Fife, just when we move on, because I've got it in my notes. Mamadou Ba subbed off at half time, and that's the second time in the 3 league games that they've played where he's been taken off at the interval. I think that's perhaps another position. Right back is definitely an area they need to strengthen, because I get the impression that they don't particularly trust Ba.
I noticed a couple of times on the highlights, and bear in mind he was only on 45 minutes and the highlights only last, whatever it is, 9 minutes, that Andy Munro maybe twice gave him a real hard time. Once before Hamilton's goal, and after Hamilton's goal. It felt like certainly at Hamilton's opener that Newton and Munro were essentially left with 3 Hamilton strikers, and Munro was giving him a hard time about it.
I think so. Although I tried to watch the goal back to see what happened. It just looks like a systematic failure across the board to allow Scott Robinson to effectively have the 12 yards outside the goal where he can control the ball and finish. I think it's just bad defending all across the board, and perhaps that was the only blight on what was a very good day from East Fife. But that was 15 minutes into the game, ultimately recovered for it and ultimately won. But I suppose that's it, the goal itself, but these things happen. It seems to be a one-off. But I do think taking Ba out of the team and upgrading him, I think that's a priority that they need to do before the transfer window shuts.
Yeah, I agree. And as you say, the fact that he was removed at the interval, it speaks volumes, I suppose. Yeah,
for it to happen twice in 3 matches as well, that's not particularly good for him. But Hamilton Academical, Shaughan, I thought that this performance, I think, seemed to be a wake-up call for them. And this was something that was echoed by, I think it was like Scott Robinson, Stephen Hendry as well in their interviews. I read them both in the Daily Record, that they said, it was a brilliant win last week against Queen of the South. I felt like a big dog result to take on one of the full-time teams in the division and beat them as comprehensively as that. And then you're coming to take on perhaps one of the weaker part-time teams in the division, a team that a lot of people have perhaps anticipated to struggle, to go there and get turned over by them. I think this is the kind of result to say, right, we can't coast, we can't be complacent, need to be a lot better going forward.
Maybe. It's certainly an excuse that you will only get away with once. I think what might be more concerning is ultimately East Fife made changes at half-time, and it felt like Hamilton couldn't get to grips with it. And East Fife had they scored twice. I think it was like 51st minute, 52nd minute. So 2 goals in quick succession. But at no point did Hamilton look like they could do anything to maybe overcome the changes East Fife have made and ultimately switch the momentum. So that's a concern, because you're right, going back to week 4, they absolutely overwhelm Queen of South. I presume they would do very much the same to East Fife on Saturday. However, it was, as I said, I thought East Fife were worthy winners.
Scott Robinson said the team were denied 3 Stonewall penalties.
I thought that was it Callum Smith that was the first one?
Connor Smith.
I didn't think that was a penalty.
Neither did the commentator as well.
He was very very enthused about the fact that it wasn't a penalty. I thought the one where I think it was Ollie Shaw had a header that went off target. I thought that might have been a penalty. An East Fife defender stuck a hand up. Maybe it could have been a penalty. And I must admit, I thought the one where
it's O'Hara. Basically, it's the one we mentioned there about Adams making the save from O'Hara. I thought that O'Hara, it all happens very quickly. He's very close to him. I think he tries to lift the ball over him and then just runs into him.
Yeah, but O'Hara might have been able to kind of get the ball at the other side of him.
I think he runs into him. I think he knows that he's not going to get it and just basically runs into him to try and buy a penalty.
I think there's a discussion to be made about whether he run into him or Adams brought him down. I thought that might have been a penalty. But what I would say was, I don't think any of the 3 of them were Stonewall penalties.
No, neither did I. I think as well as important to point out, this might be the last time we see Charlie Telfer. I think he was playing as a trialist in this match. Yeah. That's his 3rd trialist appearance of the season. I don't know where Charlie Telfer goes from here. I think a player of his talent should have found a club easily. I don't know why he's hanging around there. I mean, for instance, Matty Yates, one of the players that they had signed but weren't able to register, he's now joined Linfield. I can imagine Charlie Telfer going. I don't know why he can't get a club in the Championship, or I could foresee him following the same kind of route, going to Northern Ireland or going to the Republic of Ireland at some point soon, because I don't know what future he has at the Accies.
I suspect Telfer is maybe just keeping himself fit. But you're right, he could easily get a gig in the Championship or a cross in Ireland or whatever.
Up next is Annan Athletic versus Hamilton Academical.
I will, despite Hamilton being poor on Saturday, I'll still go for a narrow away win, maybe 2-1.
Yeah, I think Al will be kicking themselves they didn't beat Rangers after watching them against Bruges on Tuesday night. Ay caramba. And East Fife Kelty Hearts.
Big Fife derby, I will go for a score draw.
They played each other already this season in the League Cup. East Fife won it 1-0.
I don't know if you noticed, but we've actually discussed this before. I think it was last season. Dick Campbell was asked about the Fife derby. He went, "Who are we playing?" Now, I know you think that he does know who he's playing. I'm not entirely sure he does.
No, of course he does. Of course he does. He leans into this image of himself like this old dafty who doesn't, football's just out pitting boys in the park. But I think he knows. But
I would expect a kind of glimmer of a smile when he says who we were playing. I mean, he never done that. There was confusion. I don't think he does know.
Are you questioning Dick Campbell's cognitive function?
No. I just know that. I'm not 100% certain he knows who he's playing next week.
Do you remember Joe Biden at the debate? That must be about a year or so ago, where he started rambling and Donald Trump says, "Listen, I don't know what he said. I don't even think he knows what he said."
And that was it.
That was it. That finished.
That was it.
And here we are. That was 12 months later, and here we are. Fascism on your doorstep. But I suppose if that's Hamilton Academical's on the pitch, let's talk about Hamilton Academical off the pitch, because last week the club lost its elite academy status. There was a stinging article by Graham McGarry in the Herald at the weekend outlining what had happened and the impact it's had on the club, the players and its coaches. I think that the Hamilton's elite academy status was something that everyone, not just at the club but in the community, could feel proud of. But from the under-11s to under-15s, they have been placed on hold for the season ahead. The under-17s and under-19s will still train out of Broadwood. And on Wednesday afternoon, the Scottish FA confirmed the CAS 2025 awards following an auditing process and outlined why Hamilton are not part of the CAS programme for the season ahead. And I quote, "Despite being provided with numerous opportunities to do so, the club was unable to provide assurances to the licensing committee in 8 different key areas, including facilities, coaching qualifications, and child wellbeing and protection standards." So effectively, all the players have had their registrations cancelled. They are allowed to join other clubs with no compensation going to Hamilton. And that's a real shame. That's a real shame. You think of the players that have come through that academy. You obviously James McCarthy are the most famous, but I think there's dozens that are out there that have all got connections coming through Hamilton Academical, and it's such a shame. And it just highlights the demise and the sort of the mediocrity surrounding the club at the moment.
Yeah, I think it was a suggestion that this wouldn't happen. However, obviously this is now the case. I think the issue, the worst thing is if you have a Wraith Rovers or a Sinishmere or a Hamilton, the thing is your community aspect is arguably the most important thing about the club. Hamilton feels like they no longer have any of that. So whether that's the 11s, the 13s, the 17s, the 19s, they don't have anything at all. So you kind of think to yourself, what are they offering to the local community? Mm-hmm. It doesn't feel like they're offering too much.
Well, certainly not at the moment. If you're training out of Broadwood, you're not offering much at all. And I think that the Graham McGarry's article in the Herald, it said they've been promised. And I think that's something that seems to happen a lot with Hamilton Academicals, promises that are just not being kept. They were said that although the club had moved to Broadwood, the academy would still continue to train in Hamilton. And then when they were told that's not the case, they were going to be moving to Broadwood. I think there was a degree of dismay amongst the parents. How on earth do you take kids after school to 13 miles away? It's too difficult to do. And in that same article, there was coaches complaining again about promises not being kept over equipment and wages being paid on time. And it must be just such a demoralising environment if you're trying to do your best and bring through these young players. In fact, not just bring through, but just a place for young people to go and play football. Not everyone's there. Not everyone's going to be a professional footballer at the end of it. If you build this environment for them, that's a really good thing, and that is something that if you're not a Hamilton fan, you can still get behind and appreciate. And to not have that anymore, it's just a real shame that the town of Hamilton doesn't have football in it at the moment.
And I suppose it's just another example of Hamilton. And I don't want to say their demise because that's not the case, but there are things they're doing wrong, if that makes sense. When was the last time Hamilton done anything right? You'd struggle to think of it.
Off the pitch. I don't know. Maybe you're going back to the time as a Premiership club. Maybe a long time ago. And we mentioned there about this is perhaps the last time they're going to be able to play Charlie Telfer. There was also reports the club have been asked the rules of registration of amateur players to be explained to them. This came after they tried and failed to register Dean Linus and Dylan McGuigan, who are coaches at the club, and assistant manager Darian McKinnon for the game against Motherwell B last week. I don't know why they need the rules explained to them. It's like you're not players, so I don't know. I'm surprised they need to know what the rules are, given the fact that they have signed things like Cale Loffrey, Idris Munir, and Mikey Stone on amateur contracts. So if they need, I don't know why they need the rules to be explained to them. It felt as though it's much similar to what they did when they tried to circumvent the transfer embargo they were under. It feels like they're just trying to do it again. They're just trying to cut corners and find ways not to play by the rules.
I'm not sure if they're trying to cut corners or if they genuinely don't know or just genuinely aren't particularly good at running a football club, which I suppose could be a a suggestion. But as far as the Herald was concerned, at the weekend, they said that they had, as you say, there was at least three players in their starting lineup for the Motherwell B game in midweek for the Challenge Cup tie, who weren't allowed to essentially play for them. At that point, John Rankin, well, he wasn't in the dugout for the Motherwell game, which is quite interesting. I don't know if maybe there was never any intention for him to be there, or maybe it just had enough. I don't know.
It might be something like that where, for a game like this, where it's a pretty low stakes affair, despite the fact they were charging 20 quid to get in for a game against Motherwell B, which is an absolute shambles in itself, it might be the kind of game where you might defer to like an academy coach or a youth coach or something like that. I think it was Shaughan Fagan, who is he a coach at the club? I think he's got a reasonably seniorish role at Hamilton. Nevertheless, I think they were going to defer to him. So I think Rankin not being there just makes it look, maybe Rankin had never intended to be there, but it just looks worse in the circumstances. Aye, damn shame. It's the fans. It's the fans you feel for, and trying to keep up to it as you do by reading Pie and Bovril, which we often quote. The Hamilton thread's almost impossible to pick through. There's so many new posters have signed up for it. A lot of aliases in there. Very difficult to know. Maybe that's just a lack of media literacy on our part. Our comprehension skills aren't particularly good. But that thread is a bit of a car crash, and it seems like there's lots of different factions, people that are maybe trying to pull in the same direction, but aren't. Do you know that they want different versions of the same thing? And so it's become quite factional. So I think it's a long way back for Hamilton to sort themselves out.
Yeah, and hopefully they can. And I thought it was interesting in terms of the East Fife highlights. They started with a kind of fake fox that's above the stand at Hamilton. I don't know if you watched.
No, I just skipped to the action. I didn't want to see the players training up.
They have Hamilton have a fake fox above the stand. I presume that's to fool, I don't know, seagulls, birds, don't know.
I presume so. Why else would you put a fox on top of a football stadium in Cumbernauld?
But surely even seagulls can work out that's not a real fox.
I don't know. Our seagulls seem particularly stupid to me.
And surely they have a brain about them. But I appreciate where you're coming from.
Yeah. If there's anyone here who's an ornithologist, do let us know the intelligence levels of seagulls. I think they're stupid. Shaughan disagrees with me. Who's right? Get in touch and let us know. We won't drop anywhere. We're going to, God, that's me got my 3-game podcast on the brain there. We're not going to drop anywhere. We're going to stay in League One and go to our second match, and we're going to travel to Dumfries for Queen of the South's 4-0 win over Peterhead. And you better believe Big Ped Murphy was grinning from ear to ear after this one. Curtis Guthrie put the Doonhamers ahead after 34 minutes, and the game was effectively wrapped up after 2 early second-half strikes from Benji Louison, which is an absolute cracker, by the way, and Kai Kennedy. And Taylor Charters added the cherry on the top later on. Queens bounced back immediately after last weekend's disappointment to Hamilton and East Kilbride. They're in second place. Peterhead are in 6th. Shaughan, what did you think of Queen of the South 4, Peterhead 0?
I once again enjoyed listening to Jamie McNee. So that's the first thing. I suppose second thing in terms of Queen of South, they maybe answered a lot of questions, especially after a kind of hammering from Hamilton. The fact that they'd lost to East Kilbride and it could have been a kind of heavier defeat. But a lot of what you hear about Queen of South is they're boring to watch. Maybe Curtis Guthrie can't lead the line. Maybe they are porous at the back. But actually, on Saturday, like they were good fun to watch.
Yeah.
Looked like it was like 4-0 going on more.
Mm-hmm.
Like it looked like a really fun performance, which you can't say a lot about when it comes to Peter Murphy's side.
I think you're right. I think that by the sounds of things, and going by Jamie McNee's interview, I think losing Jason Brown early doors, I think the ball clattered him in the head. And he was just, I think he got the whirlies and had to be taken off. Caleb Goldie came on and replaced him. That caused a great degree of disruption to Peterhead, and they weren't really the same team without their captain in it. But as McNee says, it was just that he didn't think his team were aggressive enough. Queen of the South want to take advantage. The Queen of the South want to play the ball out the back. If they want to play the ball at the back, you've got to be really quite tight in the press. They weren't. Queens were able to play through them. They couldn't really deal with Curtis Guthrie's physicality up front. And I don't think that Peterhead had any answer to how Queen of the South played. I think that was as simple as that. And once Queen of the South hit their groove, especially in that second half, when you mean Benji Lucent's goal, just from that's end-to-end stuff. That's a really, 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 really nice football with that. I think there's about 4 or 5 players involved in the move. Peterhead just found it difficult to live with them, and Queen of the South really looked as though they were enjoying themselves out there.
It felt like they were maybe, I don't know, between two stools in terms of they wanted to press. So that seemed to be the suggestion that Jamie McNee was suggesting. They wanted to press, but they couldn't do it accurately. And then as soon as Queen of the South wanted to essentially mix it up and go physical, they couldn't really match up with them. Mm-hmm. And I appreciate that, because Queen of the South are a full-time team and probably have more physical players. If you want to do that, then they will. You would normally they would win out over a part-time side, and that's how it felt. Like it was 4-0 going on, I don't know, 5 or 6. It was a quite easy win. Yeah,
you mentioned that there about how Queens were the better side, but I think that silk and steel, a really good example. That's actually the first goal. It's quite patient play from Queens, and the ball's eventually worked out to the left-hand side, and it's Kai Kennedy chucks the ball in, and there's big Curtis Guthrie at the back post, who is able to head it in from a tight angle to get the ball rolling for it. And I think if there was doubts about whether or not Curtis Guthrie could lead the line, and there's 4 goals in 7 appearances. Could have been 5 actually. The header from a corner that was cleared off the line shortly after they took the lead. So there's maybe it was a bit of an aberration then against Hamilton, and this is the real Queens. But you've got to say it was against fairly limited opposition who found it quite difficult to play against them. And especially, I mean, there's like Div Wilson for that third goal. It's like just a punt up the park, and he tries to control it, miscontrols it, and there's Kennedy's able to dance around him. And it's a nice finish as well. Once he gets into the box, he sort of waiting for Jack Newman to play his hand first, and then he's able to finish. It was a good goal, but Peterhead didn't necessarily help themselves as well.
I mean, you talk about the third goal from Kennedy. It was a good performance from him. Like I suppose Queen of South there's some players there. Kennedy is probably the best example in terms of somebody who has played at a higher level and has dropped down and can he turn it on consistently enough to either lead Queen of South out that division, or maybe win a move up the way. But I thought on Saturday it looked excellent. Mm-hmm. Like he scored the goal, he set up that, I think it was the first goal, but also could add another 2 or 3 to his tally as well. I thought he looked excellent.
Yeah, he did. He looked really good, and I think that's really important it's an important season for Kennedy, because we all know how talented a player he is. Perhaps lost his way a little bit. Some moves haven't worked out for him, but if you can prove that he's a good player, then the rewards will be there, because he is very talented, and we hope he can get the move upwards. But we mentioned there about as good as Queen of the South were, but there was some examples of Peterhead not necessarily helping themselves. We mentioned Div Wilson's touch, which was really poor, that allowed Kennedy to take full advantage. The fourth goal as well is quite bad from a Peterhead perspective too, because it's like Taylor Charters combines with Reece Lyon. He basically passes into it and just basically continues his run forward, follows the pass. And as he's sort of like jogging forward to join the attack, he basically runs past Andy McCarthy's shoulder. And McCarthy doesn't really notice that he's been blindsided. So then when Lyon pops the ball back into him, there's Charters there to get it's a good shot, but there was no one putting any pressure on him to have the shot. So nothing worked. Nothing seemed to work for them.
You're right. I did think by that point Peterhead I don't mean they'd given up, but in terms of giving it 100% and maybe weren't giving it that at that point.
It was just again, bad day at the office. Like they get a penalty late on where Jack Hanna pushes Kieran Shanks at the corner. Kieran Shanks steps up to take it. I think that ball's landed in the Solway Firth. That ball was so off target. And Shanks had a really good chance at the start of the game at 0-0. There's a really good ball that's put across. I think Seb Ross, no one gets near him down the right, whips the ball in across the face of goal, and Shanks just needs to get a toe on it because it's hit with a lot of pace, a lot of power, get the toe to divert in the net and doesn't get into it. And that felt as though it was as good as it got for them. So it's bad for Peterhead, and you feel sorry for the fans. It's a long way to travel. Is that the longest distance in the division? I think it must be. Yeah, Peterhead's the most northeast down to the...
Must be, yeah.
Yeah, it must be the longest. It's a long way to go to watch your team get absolutely bodied.
But I mean, McNee did mention it in terms of he feels they're a very, very good part-time side. However, they're in a division that has good full-time teams, and they will have difficult Saturdays, I suppose.
Oh, there you go. You lose to one of the better full-time teams in division 4-0, but then you beat another part-time team 4-1 at the beginning of the season in East Fife. So I think the most important thing for Peterhead this season, it's like you're not going to get too down in the dumps about losing to Queen of the South. They're still... I think Peterhead have got the quality to stay in the division. I think that'll be the most important thing. Most realistic people will be that's the most important thing for them. Up next is Peterhead versus Cove Rangers.
I think that interesting. I actually think that Peterhead will win this. I've not been impressed with Cove at all.
Good result good fight back at the weekend, to go down to 10 men and still dig out a 3-each draw against Montrose. David Egwabor getting a hat-trick as well.
It was Montrose that went down to 10 men.
Oh, right. Oh, wow. Imagine that, not a full-time team not being able to beat 10 men Montrose. That augurs badly for this match. I'm going to go for Peterhead to win. Of course, it was Keir Bertie that was sent off, wasn't it?
Yeah.
That's right. I remember checking that in Flash Score at the weekend. Yeah. Sorry. This, ladies and gentlemen, is what happens when you come out to play without doing your homework. You say asinine things like that and you rightly get pulled up for them. Interesting game though for Queen of the South. They travel to Oakview to take on Sennismuir.
I think that Steny might win this.
I've got a good feeling about it. Good win for the Warriors at the weekend against Inverness Caledonian Thistle. Very much rode their luck at points, and I think that not being for wayward finishing and good goalkeeping, Cali Thistle could have taken an exceptional lead going into the interval, but bit of luck and great bit of dig from the team to ride out the storm, and it felt like a big watershed performance for what they're looking to do in the league. And if you can repeat that kind of performance against Queen of the South, then you certainly not the first 20 minutes. I think Gary Naismith said that was really poor. If they can repeat that, then I think Steny have got a chance to be a good game. Looking forward to going to it. Now, our third and final game on this podcast takes us to the capital, where Edinburgh City took on Annan Athletic. Aidan Smith scored a quick-fire double for the Gallagher midway through the first half, but Innes Lawson pulled one back before Robbie Mahan equalised with a 98th minute penalty. Edinburgh are still bottom of the table. They've chipped away at that punishment, that points deduction, and that's them down to minus 11. Annan, meanwhile, are still unbeaten. They've taken 5 points from their 3 games and they're in fourth. Now, I know we spoke about Edinburgh City on last week's show, but I was at this match and I think it gives us a chance to talk about Annan Athletic in a bit of detail for the first time. So, Shaughan, I will defer to you. You can ask me any questions you want about this game and I will do my best to answer them.
This very much looked like a game of two halves.
Oh.
If had Annan were 2 up at a half time, that looked very much deserving. However, I think based on the highlights, Edinburgh deserved to pick up a point. What was your musings on the 90 minutes?
I think you summed that up well. There's no point in us actually discussing the match because that's it, right? Cheers. We're going to do a Patreon and enjoy your football. Do so respectfully. No, we're joking, of course. Yeah, game of two halves is absolutely correct. I've watched quite a lot of Edinburgh City over like last season and into this season. In fact, this is the second time that I've been to see them this campaign. And taking away the Partick Thistle game, because that doesn't really count because it's against a far superior opposition. The first half performance is the worst I've seen from Edinburgh. I thought they were really, really bad. Their tactic was just hit the ball long to big Jack Duncan up front. Jayden Ferguson, the striker that they brought in from Dundee North End, he's out injured at the moment. So Jack Duncan, who is a centre-back, was playing up front for them. and he's a big strapping boy and he can put himself about. But what they were looking to do was get the ball long and get him to try and knock it down to like Innes Lawson and Malik Zaid, and it just didn't work. Keith Watson, it was an absolute gimme for Keith Watson a lot of time. Watson won most of the headers, and the headers that he didn't win basically went away from the likes of Lawson and Zaid in the opposite direction. So they weren't, the headers that he did win didn't bring any prosperity to Edinburgh City. And it was easy for Annan to play into it. And I've got to say, man, the best player in the park in that 45 minutes was Willie Gibson. The biggest compliment I can pay him, those 45 minutes, it was like watching David Anderson playing, Queen's Park, the one-time Queen's Park midfielder. You're laughing, but it was the kind of performance where Gibson, no one could get near him. No one could get near him. They was picking up, because Annan were winning so many of the first balls and then picking up a lot of the second balls, it was Willie Gibson just being able to sit in front of that defence and just wee drops of the shoulders, create space for himself. Every pass he was making was putting Annan on the front foot. Everything he was doing, they were having a lot of joy down Edinburgh's right-hand side. There's a boy, I think it was Logan Miles, that was playing for them, who's like 17 years old. I think he found it quite difficult, particularly in his opening stages. And Gibson smelled blood and was able to pick in that. And it was just an excellent performance. And any time Edinburgh were looking to build up a head of steam, it was just snuffed out. And Gibson was the one pulling all the strings. Both goals that Annan got, the penalty, they won just a horrendous tackle from Lewis MacArthur inside the penalty box.
2 feet.
He wins the ball, but you're jumping in 2 foot. You can watch the Edinburgh highlights and goes, like that when he jumps in and makes connection with the ball. Stupid. That's the second penalty he's given away in as many weeks. He did the same thing against Stranraer. Aidan Smith steps up and converts, and then 2 minutes later, Edinburgh don't get a grip in the game, and the ball's worked down the left-hand side and it's swung into the box, and no one's marking Smith at all, and the ball seems to just roll off him and into the net.
Yeah. And
I think McIndoe at one point was screaming at his team, yelling at his team. You could hear it across the entire pitch, across the running track, and there was a sort of like nervous laughter broke out amongst the crowd. He was absolutely going for them, and somebody sitting near me goes, "Sorry, Michael, I didn't quite catch that," which was quite funny.
So is that a good thing? Because I know that like McIndoe is obviously very vocal about how he, implores his team on. Is that a good thing though?
I think so because the club has set standards. We watched them against Stranraer last week, and we talked about how good they were to dig out those points to come from behind to win. So they've set a standard for the season, and that just was not being met here at all. And I know they've got injuries and some players were being played out of position and they had to play a centre back up front. But nevertheless, that just wasn't good enough for there. And I think they weren't under massive amounts of pressure. I can't really remember Annan digging out too many chances in that first half, but I think that he was really keen to get in an interval, and I think he must have given them an absolute rocket at half-time.
And then it felt like there was a massive change, whether it was a tweak to the formation or a motivation, I suppose. But certainly the second half is totally different.
Definitely. They brought in James Stokes, and James Stokes is a really good forward. You know, someone who's like just bags of energy, and someone who, like, if Duncan's just playing with his back to goal, quite easy to defend against, particularly for someone like Keith Watson, who is a pretty good signing for them. Yeah. Easy to defend against, because that's something that Watson's done his entire career. You know, just deal with big boys that want to shove him out. He's a big boy; he'll shove you back, and especially when it's like a centre back has been asked, certainly a centre back has been playing up front, and it's something to do things he's not comfortable doing. Stokes, however, is quite unpredictable. Stokes wants to pull out to the flanks a lot of the time. And it was Josh Todd that was marking him, and he was taking Josh Todd into some areas that he wasn't particularly keen to go on. And as well as Stokes coming on, they changed to a 3-5-2 formation, and that allowed Edinburgh to get more players into the box, more players closer to the attackers. And both nullify Willie Gibson and Paul McGuigan. I've got to say, I think it was Paul McGowan's best performance I've seen him have for Annan. I always think he looks quite sluggish, but he was really good alongside Gibson, particularly in that first half where it was always an option for him, always looking to go on the front foot as well. And would always, anytime Gibson got the ball, always look to move into space to give him an angle. Now, he didn't always get it, but the fact he was an option just forced Edinburgh to think about where the ball was going to go. But Edinburgh's tactic in the second half, it was basically they wanted the ball to go to the edge of the area and try to tee up Zaid or Innes Lawson, because we've seen, particularly over the course of the last season, these guys are really comfortable at shooting from distance. And they were trying to get the ball out to James Stokes on one side. They were trying to get the ball out to Robbie Mahan and really just find an opening to get the ball on the edge of the area where someone could shoot. And Annan, for the best part, were really good at defending that, because anytime the ball was played to the edge of the box, they were running out there and throwing themselves at it. In fact, there's one point where Watson gets like smacked in the head, just like running out there to charge down a shot, ball whacks him in the head. And the one time that they're slightly half a second too late to get out to it is when the ball goes to Lawson, touch, and a really, really nice finish. You can see it there. I think the player that's coming out, he just uses him as a marker and just bends the ball around him and into the net. And at that point there, you're thinking, right, well, there's a second goal's going to be coming here.
Now Willie Gibson was quite annoyed at how much injury time was played. Did you think that was...
Aye.
It was right or wrong, I suppose?
It was right, because in that second half, Annan were very slow with their play. Lots of players going down for wee niggles and so on like that. You know, that kind of way that it's the sort of thing, if I was an Edinburgh City fan, I'd have been going up the wall like with it. You know that way, players going down and that they're going to like holding their head or something like that. And that's the one the referee's got to stop the match. And Zach Balfour taking ages over his goal kicks, all that kind of thing. I thought that it felt right. It felt right. I can understand his annoyance with that, but it was a clear penalty. Xander Craik, who came on from Els Gaffney, just is at the ball half a second too late and ends up kicking Lawson across the legs inside the box. Clear penalty. Clear penalty in the highlights. Clear penalty when I was sitting in the ground and watching it, and man steps up and scores. So it was the very least that Edinburgh deserved for it was a point, but it was a good game all the same, and I think a point over the balance was a fair result.
Now, I watched the Annan highlights, and there is somebody who presumably is an Annan fan, and they, I think as Edinburgh score the penalty, say, you're still on negative points and you're bottom of the table, you fat fuck. Oh. Now, was there any kind of back and forth that you observed when you were there?
Not really.
It felt very unnecessary.
Yeah.
It felt like an Annan fan that was very annoyed.
I think there was a couple of fans at the full-time whistle were turning around and sort of giving it big licks to the Annan fans. But the Annan fans were, going to, when the players were going down and stuff, Annan fans were revelling in the frustration of the Edinburgh City supporters. So it's just, like I say, that's football. That's
I wondered if it was because you've got Edinburgh, you've got Annan, they're both in the same stand, and the Annan fans it sounded like they had a kind of Agadoo song. I wonder if that had maybe like created some kind of, I don't know, bristle between both sets of fans.
I think the only bristle you get from Agadoo is the fact that it's absolutely terrible. I think that's the only thing that would annoy me about it. But I've got to say, I think it's a good chance to talk about Annan this, because they'll be really, really annoyed and really frustrated the fact that they chucked away a 2-goal lead. But I think rumours of their demise have been greatly exaggerated. I think that after that, which was an absolutely harrowing performance in the League Cup group stages, was it 20 goals across the 4 matches they ended up conceding? There was a lot to like about the performance here. I think Watson is a good sign, as we've mentioned there. And the fact that they've actually just got a centre-back in there, it allows Gibson to play in the middle of the park. And Gibson, I've said it before, I think Gibson's on a technical level, I think he's the best football player in that division, if not the lower leagues, like overall, like the League One, League Two. I think that just his use of the ball, he's such a clever, talented player. I think he's really, really good. and playing him in the middle of the park allows him to do what he's best, that's dictate the tempo. I think what Annan, the difficulty for them, when you've got someone like Gibson, you've got someone like McGuigan, they're brilliant with the ball, but I think they struggle without it. I think they're quite easy to play through. See if you come up against midfielders that was a bit more mobile. I think that's a difficulty for Annan. But on the ball, very good. I liked Miles Gaffney, who they brought in up front. He had a successful trial period after being in the books of Cove last season. And Gaffney, actually, I think he scored 2 goals against St Mirren in the 8-2 defeat. So good day for him, bad day for the rest of the team there. But he offers them something different up front. I think that we've been so long watching Annan Athletic with Tommy Goss up front, a big man who's a bit of an all-rounder, Tommy Goss. He's quite a big physical specimen, but can do a wee bit of everything. I think Gaffney's quite quick off the mark, and it allows him to play in the counter. You saw that in the final, at the latter stages of the game, where Edinburgh were really had them on the back foot. They would have Gaffney playing in the last shoulder, and what they tried to do was, well, if they tried to win back possession, it was balls over the top for Gaffney to run onto, and it had varying degrees of success, although the only time in the second half where I think Mark Weir had anything to do, there was a sort of cross that hit off Eden Lynch's foot, and Weir got down to save it with his legs. So they didn't really create too much in the first half, and I think that Gaffney and Tam Muir will work well together up front. It's just that Edinburgh made the changes at the right time, and I just don't think that Annan necessarily responded to them well. Like Josh Todd, comfortable up against a big guy who just wants to play with his back to goal. When Stokes comes around, somebody who is really fit and quite fast, that's not the sort of player that you want to be up against. And I think he provoked him into a couple of fouls just in the edge of the box there. But no, I think that on the back of that it was a good game. That nice ebb and flow to it. And I think that, said it before, I think Edinburgh will end up finishing outside 10th place. I do think that
even with a 15-point deduction.
Yeah, I do. I think that's the last 2 matches, or even the last 3 matches, if you want to include the win over Kilmarnock B. In fact, I'm not including that win over Kilmarnock B. But there you go. You go a goal down. There you go. A goal down against Stranraer. You come back to win 2-1, and you go 2 goals down after 2 minutes, and still come back to get a penalty. I think there's definitely something there. The big disappointment for me, there was no post-match interview with Michael McIndoe published.
Yeah, that was disappointing.
Which was disappointing because I find him. Here's a revelation. I enjoy listening to his post-match interviews, but it's like I think for a game like that, it would have been good to know his thoughts and the first half performance and why it wasn't working for them and the changes that they made and the outcome. But I think for them, 4 points. It's just chipping away at it, and it'll come. And then when you look and see, for instance, Stranraer, I know that Stranraer might have been unlucky to have lost against East Kilbride at the weekend there based on the balance of play, but there's Stranraer 3 games in, 0 points. Bit of negativity around the club. At the moment, I think that they're the good League Cup campaign has given way to a quite a mediocre league campaign so far. So all's not well there. We talked about it on last week's show, Chris Aitken's post-match interview. So there's something not quite right at Stranraer, and I do think that Edinburgh have got the wherewithal and the personality to dig themselves out of it.
No, you're right, but whatever, it's 55, 60 points. That's a big target to get to. If they can make that, then fair play. I'm a wee bit worried about them.
Got to say, big shout out to Ali Moncrief, who is, I think, in fact, there's a bonus podcast dropped on Wednesday for the Patreon where Ali is talking about Edinburgh City and the how their season started with Craig Fowler. So I'll look forward to listening to that. Ali had listened to last week's podcast when I said I was going to the match. He got in touch and said, "Do you want a free ticket for it?" And the supporters club were doing a promotion. They had a number of free tickets to give away, so I was very happy to receive one. They also put 150 quid behind the bar at the Hoppy, which is a nearby pub, for anyone who's looking to go to the game, to go there and get a couple of pints beforehand. Now, I did, but I paid for my drinks. I thought it was only fair that I've taken enough freebies let the drinks for the real fans. So that's nice. I think it's something that Edinburgh are obviously trying to do, is try to encourage more people to go along and watch them, and they should, because they're a good fun team to go and watch. I think that the stuff about Meadowbank not being a great experience is like, aye, but crack on with it. Just go and watch a good football team play. And there's McDonald's there. There's the good couple of good pubs around the corner. You're only football for 90 minutes.
So I think it's hard because, like, I've been to a couple of games and enjoyed it, and enjoyed the fact that I've had a drink with Edinburgh City fans. However, I suppose it's after that point, like in terms of going to Meadowbank, is how do you sell that? And I suppose that's the issue that the Edinburgh City have at this moment in time. So I'm fine with it, but how do you sell it to a non-Edinburgh City fan? That's difficult.
Well, I tell you one way how not to sell it. Some of the music they were playing before kickoff, there was one song in particular. It was perhaps the most nastiest, aggressive piece of music that I've ever listened to in a football ground. It sounded like someone excavating the bottom of your spine. It was just needless.
What song was it?
Oh, I don't know. Just play Beautiful Day by U2. It's fine. That's one we can all agree. That's a good song. No one's going to get offended by that. Play Beautiful Day up the road. Whatever that was, it was not great. And I think it had an effect on certainly one of the ball boys. I don't know if you noticed in Edinburgh's highlights, one of the ball boys during the penalty, just basically lying down on his side.
Yes.
You noticed that? Yeah. And I'm sure that ball boy was only doing that because he was really upset about the music that was being played.
Or maybe just hadn't been trained properly.
That's it. By the way, listen, you need to stand and run after the ball. Oh, right. Nobody told me. Up next, Shaughan, Annan Athletic versus Dumbarton.
I think Annan will win that. I've been really impressed by them. Did not expect it, but I expect a home win for Annan.
And Elgin City versus Edinburgh City, Battle of the Cities.
Neither have started the season particularly well.
Edinburgh got 4 points from...
But we expected Edinburgh to be challenging at the top end of the table, I suppose.
If you said to me that Edinburgh would have 4 points at the start of the season, I'd be like, well, I know they've got -11, but like, listen, if you look at the true table based on performance...
I'll go for a draw.
A draw. I'm going for Edinburgh City to win this. Now, I think we'll leave it at that, Shaughan.
Fine.
Fine. Shaughan and I are going to record a podcast for Patreon where we round up some of the big news stories from the past week, including Rhys McCabe's departure from Airdronians. Now, I know that there's a Patreon podcast with Emma Quigley has already dropped about that, but if you want to hear people who don't know as much about Airdrie as Emma discussing it, boy oh boy, we've got something in store for you. Go to patreon.com/Terrace Podcast, and for as little as 2 hours a month, you can listen to it. I mean, there was some really good stuff that went up over the past week. There's a really good one I enjoyed. In fact, it was you and I recorded about Rangers banter years.
Yes.
Which I enjoyed that. And there's one of the Premiership sackability tier list. All good stuff. So get your American Express card out. Now, in the meantime, Shaughan and I, as you mentioned, we're going to go away, but there is a lot of football happening over the coming weekend, so enjoy yourself. But unlike the Edinburgh City supporters who chose to celebrate their 2-2 draw with Annan Athletic by chanting 2-0 and you fucked it up at the travelling support, please do so respectfully. Thank you.